We need to talk about the fear-mongering that happened around the eclipse. A warning that this video is going to discuss a story involving child death. If that is a trigger for you, you can skip to this timestamp to avoid that story. Danielle Johnson, whose social media platform had over 100,000 followers, describes her as a recording artist, astrologer, and Reiki master. Was one of numerous spiritual influencers who spent the days leading up to this week's solar eclipse warning people about the potential spiritual perils that the eclipse would bring. She warned people not to look at the sun because something big was coming. She said the apocalypse was near. She also said the eclipse was the epitome of spiritual warfare. She used her platform to spread anti-Semitism, conspiracy theories about Hollywood pedophiles and vaccines, and shared content from QAnon accounts. And on the morning of the eclipse, she stabbed her boyfriend to death, then drove off with her two daughters, a 9-year-old and an 8-month-old. While on the 405 freeway, she pushed her daughters out of the car into oncoming traffic. The 9-year-old tried to hold on to her younger sister, but was unable to. The 8-month-old died on the scene. The 9-year-old is still alive. Danielle later crashed her car into a tree at high speed, resulting in her death. It would be incorrect of me to say specifically that these deaths were a direct result of her fear of the eclipse. We cannot know that, as it has not been reported that any kind of note was left behind explaining her actions. However, I do believe we can safely assume that a person in their right mind does not stab their boyfriend and then throw their children out of a car into oncoming traffic on a freeway. And that's why I'd like to use this moment to discuss both fear-mongering in the spiritual community and how religion and spirituality of any kind are not substitutes for mental health care. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, the kind of church that had revivals. I've seen a lot of different kinds of preaching over the years, but for me, preachers fall into two camps. Either they're preaching the love of God or they're telling you to be afraid of hell. The love of God is a welcoming message. It is a message that there is a God above, a creator and father figure who loves everyone unconditionally, that there is no way that this God can fall out of love with you because their love is eternal. Like them. The well can never and will never run dry. That kind of love doesn't care if you're straight or gay. That kind of love does not create hierarchies of humanity. It specifically tells you to love your neighbor, to give deep and charitably, to not just give to the poor, but create a world in which there are no poor, in which inequity is a thing of the past. That kind of love does not close its doors during a natural disaster, but rather it opens them wide and invites everyone in to seek shelter and refuge and a pathway to get back on your feet. That kind of message tells you not to lie, cheat, or steal from your fellow man because it's the right thing to do, that the truth will always come out and that lying will only make it worse. The fear message, however, is very different. The kind of people who preach about being afraid of hell tell you that you should not lie because liars are going to roast for all of eternity in the fiery pits of hell. They tell you that you shouldn't deceive your fellow man because doing so puts your immortal soul in danger. This type of message might seem fine on its surface when it's the stuff of children's stories. We have Santa Claus if you're good, and you should be good for goodness sake because he knows if you're being naughty, but if you're bad, you might be beaten and carried off by Krampus. It's a very different kind of thing when it's placed in a spiritual or religious context. Imagine being a young queer kid told that the attractions you've held ever since your brain chemistry started changing and you started thinking about first dates and holding hands and first kisses was not just wrong, but putting your immortal soul in danger, that your intrinsic nature meant you were bound for an eternity of torture, of fire and pain, and being apart from God for something you did not choose, for who you are. That's a lot of anxiety and fear for little bodies to handle. That alone is the reason people leave the church or end up on the street or, much worse, end their lives. It's the kind of message people think they leave behind when they leave the church, and the data tells us that more and more younger generations are leaving formal religion to explore a spiritual path of their own making, a path that is inclusive of all races, gender identities, sexual orientations, that draws inspiration from religions and spiritual communities around the world, that allows space for magic and believing in impossible things. I'm one of those people. I believe in impossible things. I don't want to put boundaries on a boundless universe that we are only scratching the surface of understanding, of presuming I can see and know all there is to see and know when my eyes can't even physically see all the colors of the world around me. I invite magic into my life. I pray. I think sometimes the universe sends me little signs that I'm on the right track or warns me when I'm about to make a wrong decision. And I also allow for the possibility that both of those things are simply psychology and perception and life experience. What I don't do is spread fear. And I've been in and around that spiritual but not religious crowd, that magical crowd, that reading the signs and stars crowd long enough to know that there is a hubris amongst my cohort and that they think they've left all the fear-mongering behind when in reality, they've simply transferred it to something else. I have watched in recent weeks as my fellow magically minded people tell their followers to be careful during the eclipse, to be wary of the eclipse, that acting in a wrong way could spell disaster for your life during the eclipse. I have seen people portend doom over earthquakes over earthquakes coinciding with eclipses. They will share news headlines about Christian evangelists who warn that the apocalypse is coming, that the eclipse is going to herald the rapture, politicians who tell you God is punishing you with hurricanes, and they will laugh at these headlines as though they did not spend months telling people that touching Moldavite would ruin their lives, as though they did not tell their millions of followers that you can accidentally curse your entire family by dropping a piece of fruit. People have been critical of the way in which I use my platform to discuss spiritual matters. I have been told I am an agnostic, that I am simply an angry militant atheist in disguise, that I am here to debunk the mystical, and that's simply not true. I have said for years now that my purpose is to teach people to interrogate their beliefs, that if someone is telling you to be afraid of something, it is okay to question why, to hold it up to the light, to add context, to test it, to research what science and history and folklore and psychology and religion all have to say on the matter. And then, if the claim stands up to that scrutiny, it has earned your belief. I am here to tell you, for example, that yes, hag writing is a terrifying thing, that waking up in the middle of the night unable to move with visual hallucinations of an evil presence would be shocking, and that cultures all over the world have different explanations and spiritual remedies for it. But I'm also here to tell you that sleep paralysis has been well understood by scientists and doctors, that there is a real-world explanation for the phenomenon, in the hope that when someone tells you to be afraid of something going bump in the night, that you feel empowered to turn the lights on and see if it's actually the boogeyman or if it's just an old pipe that needs to be replaced. Ghost hunting shows seem to be geared in recent years to tell you to be afraid of the dark, that demons and dark forces are not only waiting for you, but hungry for you, that they're after you. They want to attack you. But when you go behind the scenes and look for explanations, you'll find special effects teams, well-planned scripts, and staged interactions. You'll find people misusing equipment or misrepresenting their findings. You'll have spiritual writers and teachers using the trappings of science, sharing articles sporadically when they align with their pre-existing beliefs without the burden of science. People think they leave all that religious trauma, that fear-mongering behind, but all they've done is transfer it from the pulpit to the night sky. I have also seen practitioners and educators tell you that your mental health can be explained and managed through careful understanding of astrology or a deck of cards without the need to speak to a mental health professional. In fact, that mental health professionals are the enemy, that all they'll tell you is that you're crazy, that they'll try and put boundaries on your experience. And sure, there are bad therapists out there, but in my many years of experience with multiple therapists and research on the matter, they just want to make sure that whatever you're engaging in is healthy, is supportive, is fulfilling, and doesn't instead keep you up at night with anxiety and fear that you've somehow angered the wrong God, or that you need to give all your money and time to a spiritual leader who is preying on your gullibility and loneliness. And yes, we must acknowledge that being able to seek out quality, affordable mental health care in this country is a privilege, but that still does not mean that spirituality is a replacement for it. Both things can be true at the same time. If someone is telling you to be afraid of something in the stars or the spirit world, turn on the lights, get a second opinion, seek a mundane explanation if there is one, add context, ask questions, and interrogate the answers you're given. Your spirituality shouldn't make you afraid. It might test you, it might challenge you, but it should challenge you to be a better version of yourself, not rid yourself of your sanity or your self-worth. If you are looking to the stars or to the pulpit or to a spiritual influencer, and what you are finding is a message that you should be afraid, that you are in spiritual peril, that your soul is doomed, that there is nothing you can do and nowhere you can turn, that is not someone who has your best interests at heart. Don't listen to them. Hope this helps.